The wine glass touched the table with a soft click, and the air inside the diner tightened until it was hard to breathe. The man across from her laughed loud and cruel, his eyes dragging across her wheelchair. "This is what I'm supposed to accept," he said, loud enough for every table to hear. She did not answer. Her hand closed around the edge of her napkin. No one moved. No one spoke. Then a stranger stood up from the back of the room and started walking toward them. He did not know her name. He did not know that the next 60 seconds would unmake everything he thought his life would be. So why did he stand up? The diner sat on the corner of Willow and Fifth, the kind of place that smelled like burnt coffee and fryer oil no matter what time of day. Lucas Grant had taken the booth by the window because it was the only seat where the vinyl did not stick to his jeans, and because from there he could see his truck in the parking lot, the one with the dented tailgate and the engine he had rebuilt twice that year. He had come in alone for a cheap plate of eggs because the garage had not cleared enough that week to justify a real dinner, and his hand still carried the smell of motor oil under the nails, the kind of smell a man stops noticing after a decade of working on other people's cars. He had not meant to look at the couple 2 tables over. He had been reading the check, running the numbers in his head, thinking about the second mortgage notice in the glove compartment and how many more weeks the bank would wait. But the man's voice kept getting louder, and something about the shape of it pulled Lucas's eyes up from the paper in his hand. The woman sat very still. Her chair was not a restaurant chair. It was a sleek, matte black wheelchair, the kind that cost more than most people's rent, though Lucas did not know that yet. He only saw that she was holding herself together the way people do when they have decided not to cry in public. She looked early 30s with dark hair pulled back and a navy blouse that was expensive without trying, and her hands were folded on the table and she was not eating. The man across from her was eating. He cut into his steak with slow, performative strokes, smiling at her the way a man smiles when he wants the whole room to watch him be cruel. His name was Brandon Shaw, though Lucas would not learn that until later. Brandon leaned forward with his elbows on the table, unhurried, enjoying himself. "So your profile didn't mention the chair," Brandon said. "That's a pretty big thing to leave out, don't you think?" The woman answered quietly. Lucas could not hear her words, only the low, even tone of someone who had said them before to other men in other rooms. Brandon laughed and leaned back, spreading his arms along the top of the booth, the way a man does when he believes he owns a place. "I'm just being honest. You want honesty, right? I drove 40 minutes for this. I thought we were meeting for dinner, not for charity." He said the word charity loudly, and 2 older women at the counter turned their heads and then turned back, pretending they had not. The woman's jaw tightened. She reached for her water glass, and her hand was steady, which impressed Lucas more than it should have. "I mean," Brandon went on, warming to himself, "you look good from the waist up. I'll give you that. But this is what I'm supposed to accept for the rest of my life. You should have led with it. You should have put it in the first message. People have a right to know what they're signing up for." A waitress passed with a tray of drinks and kept her eyes on the tray. The cook behind the pass did not look up. A young couple near the door whispered to each other, pulled out their phones, and began to film, not to help her, but because it was content. That was the part that would bother Lucas most later when he thought about it. Not the cruelty of the man, but the tidy, practiced looking away of everyone else in the room. The old tired thing settled in his chest, the voice that had kept him quiet through 100 ugly moments in his life. It told him what it always told him. You have your own problems. You have a garage 2 weeks from closing. You have people at home counting on you to stay in one piece, not in a fight with some stranger's date. Keep your head down. Pay your check. Walk out the door. He almost did. He actually set the bills on the table. He actually slid to the edge of the booth and felt his knee crack the way it always did after a long shift. Then Brandon said, "Honestly, sweetheart, I don't even know why you bother showing up to these things." Something in Lucas went quiet. It was not anger. Anger was loud, and this was not loud. It was the stillness he got when a bolt was stripped and he had to stop and think before he did anything else, or he would make it worse. He stood up. He walked across the diner without hurrying. He did not know what he was going to say until he was already at the edge of their table, his hand resting lightly on the back of the empty chair beside the woman. "Excuse me," Lucas said. His voice was flat, working man, flat the voice he used on customers who tried to underpay. "You done?" Brandon looked up with a handsome, practiced smile, the kind cheap suits come with. "I'm sorry, do we know each other?" "No," Lucas said. "I'm asking if you are done. With your dinner. With her. With whatever you think you're doing in here." Brandon's smile flickered at the edges. "Buddy, this is a private conversation. It stopped being private about 10 minutes ago," Lucas said, keeping his voice even. He did not look at the woman yet. He knew that if he looked at her now before he finished, he would lose the thread. "Everyone in here can hear you. That's the thing about saying cruel things loud. People hear them." Brandon laughed, but the laugh came out thinner this time. "Are you her boyfriend? Her brother?" "I'm nobody to her," Lucas said. "That's the point. If I can hear it from across the room, and I'm nobody to her, you should probably stop." The diner had gone quiet. The young couple had put their phones down. The two older women at the counter were openly watching now, and the cook had stepped forward from the past to see what was happening. Lucas watched Brandon do the small, ugly math that men like him always did. He counted the eyes on him. He counted Lucas's shoulders, the grease on his knuckles, the lack of anything soft in his face. He set down his fork carefully, as if that gesture might preserve some piece of his dignity. Whatever Brandon said. He pulled out his wallet and threw 2 $20 bills on the table, not enough to cover the meal, but enough to feel like a gesture. He stood, looked at the woman one more time, and his mouth opened as if he had one final thing to say. "Don't," Lucas said. Brandon did not. He walked out and the door chimed behind him, and for a long moment, nobody in the diner moved or spoke. Lucas finally looked at her. She was staring at the space where Brandon had been, not at him. Her eyes were wet, but she had not let anything fall. "I'm sorry," he said, and it surprised him to hear himself say it. "For all of it. Not just him." She turned her head. Up close, her eyes were gray and tired, and sharper than he had expected, and she studied his face the way a mechanic studies an engine looking for what was broken and what was worth keeping. When she finally spoke, her voice was low and level. "Sit down," she said. Lucas glanced back at his booth at the bills he had left there for his eggs at the coffee going cold in the cup. Then he pulled out the chair across from her, the one Brandon had been sitting in, and he sat. He did not know her name. He did not know she was Naomi Clark. He did not know she could buy the diner and everything on the block with what she kept in checking. He only knew that he was tired, and she was tired, and the chair beneath him was still warm. The waitress came over then, as if she had been waiting for a cue. She set a fresh cup of coffee in front of Lucas, without asking, and she set a glass of ice water in front of the woman, with a quiet, apologetic look that was its own kind of too-late kindness. Then she left them alone, and the diner slowly returned to the sounds of forks and low conversation, as if nothing had happened, as if cruelty were just another item on the menu that had been cleared away. The woman watched Lucas wrap his hand around the coffee cup. She did not thank him. He had half expected the standard thing the careful phrases the eyes full of grateful water. He got none of it. "Why did you do that?" she said. Lucas considered the question. He could tell she had asked it the exact same way to other people in other rooms, about other favors, and that she wasn't interested in a comfortable answer. "I don't know," he said. "Try." He turned the cup in his hands. The coffee was bad, too hot, and too bitter, and he drank it anyway because he needed something to do with his mouth. "I almost didn't," he said. "I had my money on the table. I was on my way out. I almost walked past you and pretended I hadn't heard a word of it." Something he said the thing about not knowing why you bother showing up. Something in that turned me around. I don't know what. I'm not a good man. I'm just a tired one. That's not the same thing, she said. No, he said. It isn't. She told him her first name was Naomi, and she did not ask for his. He offered it anyway. Lucas. Just Lucas. They talked for about 20 minutes, though later he could not remember exactly what they talked about. He remembered she did not try to soften him, and he did not try to impress her. She asked what he did for a living, and he said cars, mostly engines, a small garage on the north side of town, 2 bays, 1 employee who had not been paid on time in 3 weeks. He did not know why he told her that last part. She had not asked. It was just that she listened in a way that made it easy to say true things. She did not offer anything. She did not ask for his number. When she finished her water, she reached into the small leather case on the side of her chair, took out a white card with a single phone number printed on it, and set it on the table between them without comment. Then she signaled the waitress paid for both checks with a black card he did not get a good look at, and told him simply that she hoped his next week was better than his last one. Then she rolled toward the door with the smooth, unhurried competence of a person who had stopped needing help a long time ago, and he watched her go, and he told himself he would never see her again. 3 days later, she came into his garage. He did not recognize the car at first. It was a low, dark sedan, hand-built, no badge he could read from across the lot, the kind of vehicle that did not drive itself down a street like his unless someone had made a specific decision. The driver got out first, a clean-cut man in a gray suit who did not look like any client Lucas had ever had. Then the back door opened, and the driver unfolded the wheelchair, and Naomi came out of the car with the same calm motion he remembered from the diner. Lucas was under a 1998 pickup that had been in his bay for 2 days longer than he had told the owner it would be. He rolled out from under it on the creeper, wiped his hands on a rag that was dirtier than his hands, and stood up. "Naomi," he said. Lucas. She looked around the garage the way a woman used to evaluating buildings looked around a building. She did not comment on the cracked concrete, or the stain under the lift, or the invoice clipped to the pegboard with the word "Final" stamped across the top in red. She only looked, and she counted something behind her eyes. "You didn't give me your last name," she said. "You didn't ask for it. It's Grant. I had someone look you up. My last name is Clark. It might mean something to you. It might not. Most people around here know the name Clark because of a hospital wing or a scholarship or a building downtown. That's my father's name mostly. The rest of it is mine." Lucas wiped his hands on the rag again, slower this time. The name did mean something to him. Everyone in the county knew the name Clark. He had driven past the Clark Center for Advanced Surgery on his way to work every day for 5 years. "I'm not here to thank you again," Naomi said. "I already did that in my way. I'm here because I had 3 days to think about what happened in that diner, and I came to a decision. I'd like to invest in your garage." Lucas laughed before he could stop himself. It was not a happy laugh. It was the laugh of a man who had been carrying something heavy for a long time and was not ready to set it down just because someone had finally offered to help. "Ma'am," he said. "Don't do that," she said. "Don't ma'am me. I'm not older than you." "Then I don't know what you want me to call you. I don't know what this is. It's a business proposal. I met you for 20 minutes in a diner. I know how long I met you for. I also know how you spoke to that man, and I know how you spoke to me after he left, and I know what's on your sign out front, which is not the name of a person who takes shortcuts. That's enough information for me." He shook his head slowly. "You don't know what's on my books." "I do, actually." I had that looked up too. He felt the slow, particular heat of being seen through. It was not a pleasant feeling. His pride, the last piece of armor he still wore, took a hit and did not quite recover. "Then you know I can't pay anything back soon," he said. "I didn't ask you to. And you know I'm about a month from losing this place. Closer to 3 weeks, actually." Lucas let out a breath he did not know he had been holding. He looked past her at the pickup on the lift at the sign in the window that said "Open" because he did not have the energy to flip it. He thought about the mortgage notice in the truck. He thought about the employee who had not been paid on time. He thought about the thing he had always told himself, which was that he would close the doors himself before he took money from anyone who might later decide to own him. "Why me?" he said. "Because I've been in rooms full of men who talk about character, the way people talk about the weather," Naomi said. "They wear it. They don't live in it. I saw you stand up when no one was watching you for the right reasons. I decide where my money goes based on that. It was one moment. That's all I ever get to see of anyone. That's all anyone ever sees of me, either." He looked at her, then really looked. She was not asking him for permission. She was telling him what she had decided. And the quiet place inside him that had turned him around in the diner, the one he did not understand, went quiet again. "I need to think about it," he said. "Take the week," she said. "But not longer. I don't like slow decisions." He took 4 days. He did not sleep well for any of them. On the 5th morning, he called the number on the card, and he told her he was in. She said she would send her people over, and she did that same afternoon. 2 quiet men in blazers, who walked his garage with clipboards and asked him questions he had never thought to ask himself about his own business. By the end of that week, there was a new sign being painted. By the end of the next one, there were 2 new lifts on order, a proper accounting service, and a line of credit opened under terms that did not make his stomach turn over. He used the first draw to cover what the garage owed him, and what the garage owed him covered the second mortgage, which was why his house was still his at the end of the month. He had not told Naomi about any of that. It felt private, and it felt like the kind of debt he would rather carry alone. Lucas kept expecting the other shoe. He had lived long enough to know that good things arrived with hidden costs, and he waited every morning to find out what Naomi's would be. The cost when it came did not come from her. The first sign was small. A supplier he had worked with for 8 years called on a Tuesday and told him they were sorry, but they would not be able to extend him parts on the usual terms anymore. Net 30 had become cash on delivery. When Lucas asked why the man on the other end did not have a good answer, there was a long, embarrassed silence, and then he said something about new policies, and then he got off the phone. The second sign came 2 days later. A city inspector walked into the garage without an appointment and spent 90 minutes writing down every minor violation he could find, things that had been there for a decade, without comment. By the end of the week, there was a letter in the mailbox citing 4 code issues that would each carry a fine if not addressed within 30 days. None of them were serious. All of them were expensive. Naomi's contractor handled the repairs within 10 days, but the fines were on the record now, and the record would follow the business. The third sign had a name. The name was Victor Hale. Hale owned the biggest auto group in the county, 3 dealerships, and a chain of service centers that sat on the main roads like toll booths. Lucas had known of him the way everyone in the trade knew of him, a man who smiled on local television and priced his competitors into the dirt when no one was looking. The connection was not obvious until Naomi came back to the garage that Friday with her laptop in her bag and her mouth set in a hard line. "Victor Hale is a former partner of my father's," she said. "A long time ago. He and my father fell out over a deal, and he has spent the last 15 years finding ways to make our name cost something. I should have told you about him the first day. I didn't because he has gone quiet for 2 years, and I let myself believe he had moved on. That was my mistake. The minute he heard I'd put money into your business, he started making calls. Your father's feud is why my supplier dropped me. My father's feud is the reason Hale is paying attention. You are the reason he thinks he can win. A small garage, a new partnership, a man he believes he can intimidate. He has done this to other places of mine. He does it well." Lucas sat down on the edge of the workbench. The same quiet voice that had kept him small for most of his life was speaking to him again, and this time it had a new message, which was that He had not just signed up for an investment. He had signed up for a war he had not known was already in progress. "I didn't agree to this," he said quietly. "I know. You should have told me. You're right. I'm telling you now. And I'm telling you the rest of it before you hear it somewhere else." She set the laptop on the workbench between them and opened it. She walked him through 6 months of surveillance her security team had kept on Hale after the last time he had tried to damage one of her holdings. Photographs, invoices, a shell company in Delaware, the name of a public relations firm in the city. Lucas did not understand most of what he was looking at, but he understood the shape of it, which was that Naomi had been watching Hale for a long time, and Hale did not know. "I'm not going to pull out," she said. "If I pull out now, he wins, and everyone who does business with me sees that he wins. But if you want out, I'll end the partnership clean. You keep the new lifts, the repairs, the line of credit. You owe me nothing. That's on the table, and it will stay on the table." Lucas looked at her for a long time. "No," he said, finally. "If you're in, I'm in." "You're sure?" I stood up in the diner. "I'll stand up for this." It got worse over the following weeks. A local paper ran a piece, the kind of piece that was not quite an accusation, but that let every reader form one in their own head. There were questions, it said, about the terms of the investment in Grant Auto. There were questions about whether a small family garage had been quietly absorbed by out-of-town money. There were questions about favorable treatment, about zoning, about whether Lucas Grant, longtime local mechanic, had traded the handshake culture of the neighborhood for the quiet coin of a woman most people in town had never met. The piece did not have a byline Lucas recognized. The quotes in it came from people who were not named. But the story moved the way stories move when someone has paid for them to move, and within a week, his phone was ringing with cancellations. 3 customers pulled appointments. A longtime client came by in person to say, not unkindly, that his wife had read the article and did not want him coming here anymore. Then the letter arrived. A public hearing had been scheduled at City Hall, an open session of the Small Business Review Board, convened at the request of concerned community stakeholders. The subject was the proposed expansion of Grant Auto, which required a minor variance Naomi's team had filed weeks earlier as a routine matter. The variance had been routine once. Now it was not. The night before the hearing, Lucas sat alone in his kitchen with the letter on the table in front of him. He had not told Naomi about the 2 suppliers who had dropped him that afternoon, or about the message his one employee had left on his voicemail, asking carefully whether he should start looking for other work. He did not want to tell her because he had spent his whole life being the person who carried his own weight, and he did not know how to stop. He thought about what Naomi had said in the garage about one moment being all anyone ever got to see. He thought about Brandon Shaw in the diner, and about the people who had filmed her instead of helping. He thought about how easy it was in the end to be on the wrong side of a story, because most people would only ever see the headline. He understood sitting at that table that he had already lost. The hearing tomorrow was a formality. The town had made up its mind in the parking lot and the grocery aisle and the comment sections, and he would walk into that room already guilty of something he could not name. The garage was going to close. The partnership was going to be reported as a failure, or worse, as a scandal. And the last clean thing he had, which was the name over the door, was going to come down stained. He folded the letter along its crease and put it back in the envelope, and he sat in his kitchen for a long time with the lights off. The hearing was held in the small council chamber on the 2nd floor of City Hall, a long room with fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly and wooden benches that had been polished by 40 years of nervous hands. Lucas arrived early in the only clean shirt he owned that did not smell of the garage. He sat in the 2nd row, and he did not look around because he already knew what he would see. The room was full. Neighbors he had fixed cars for suppliers he had worked with for a decade. The 2 older women who had been at the counter in the diner that night, all of them were there, and none of them met his eyes in the way they would have 6 weeks ago. That was the part that cost the most. He had lived in this town for 16 years, and he could feel the quiet way it had already closed around him. Victor Hale sat in the front row on the opposite side. He wore a navy suit that fit him the way money fits a man who has had it long enough to stop noticing, and he smiled at the board members as they came in one by one with the easy familiarity of someone who had donated to each of their campaigns. When he turned his head, his eyes found Lucas, and he gave him a small, polite nod, the kind of nod that was not meant to be kind. Naomi came in a minute before the hearing began. She rolled down the center aisle with her laptop bag across her knees and her face unreadable, and she took the open space at the end of the front row on Lucas's side. She did not look at Hale. She looked at Lucas once briefly, and in that glance he saw something he had not expected, which was that she was frightened too, and that she had decided not to show it. The chair of the board, a tired woman named Margaret Ellis, opened the session and read the agenda item in a flat voice. The matter of the variance, the matter of the partnership, the matter of community concern. Hale was called first because Hale had requested the hearing, and he stood up without notes. He spoke for 11 minutes. He did not raise his voice. He never said Lucas's name with anything but respect, and he never said Naomi's name with anything but formal care, and that was what made him dangerous. He spoke about transparency. He spoke about the character of a neighborhood. He spoke about small businesses being quietly swallowed by outside capital, and he produced documents, and he cited figures, and he made it sound as if the only thing standing between the town and a loss of its soul was the good judgment of the 7 people on that board. When he sat back down, the room was with him. Lucas could feel it in the quality of the silence. Margaret Ellis called Lucas to speak. He stood up slowly. He had written 3 versions of a statement the night before, and he had thrown all of them away at around 2 in the morning. He walked to the small wooden podium at the front of the room, and he set his hands on either side of it, because he needed them to be still. And he looked out at the faces he had known for 16 years. "I'm not going to read anything," he said. His voice came out steadier than he had expected. "I had some things written down. I threw them out. I'm going to tell you the truth instead, because that's the only thing I have that Mr. Hale does not." The room shifted slightly. He felt it rather than saw it. 6 weeks ago, I was eating dinner by myself at the diner on Willow, he said. I had $42 in my checking account. I was 2 weeks from missing payroll on the one employee I have. I had a final notice from my bank in the glove compartment of my truck. I am telling you this because Mr. Hale has spent the last 3 weeks asking the town to wonder how a man like me came to be in partnership with a woman like Ms. Clark. That's a fair question. I owe you the answer. He told them about Brandon Shaw, though he did not use his name. He described the laugh and the word charity and the people filming instead of helping, and the way Naomi had sat through it without letting anything fall. He told them he had almost walked out. He told them he had put his money on the table and slid to the edge of the booth and picked his keys up off the vinyl. I'm not a hero, he said. I'm a tired man who runs a small garage. I almost did the easy thing that night the same as everyone else in that room. The only reason I didn't is that something he said was worse than being tired, and I stood up before I could talk myself out of it. That is the entire story. Ms. Clark did not know me. I did not know her. We had a 20-minute conversation afterwards, and 3 days later, she came to my garage with an offer I did not understand and tried to turn down. He looked over at Naomi. She was watching him with the same steady gray eyes from the diner. She told me she decides where her money goes based on what people do when nobody is making them, he said. I didn't believe her at the time. I thought there was a catch. I kept waiting to find out what it was going to cost me. It turns out it cost me this room. It cost me customers who have known me for 10 years. It cost me suppliers who shook my hand on deals a decade ago and who now will not return my calls. Mr. Hale has done a very thorough job of making my partnership with Ms. Clark look like something it is not, and I want to say plainly on the record that I understand why some of you believed him. He is good at what he does. He looked at Hale then. Hale's face had not changed. but the smile was gone. "I run my garage the way my father ran his," Lucas said. "I do not cheat people on parts. I do not charge a woman more than a man for the same labor. I do not take a car apart to find problems that were not there. I will put all of that in writing under oath, and I will open my books to anyone on this board who wants to see them. That is all I have. That is what I brought." He went back to his seat. His hands were shaking by the time he sat down, but only a little. Naomi asked to speak next. She did not go to the podium. She stayed in her chair at the front of the aisle, and she opened her laptop on her lap, and she spoke to the board in the same level voice she had used in the diner on the day Brandon Shaw had walked out. She laid out the terms of her investment in Grant Auto. She named the dollar figure, which was smaller than most of the room had been led to imagine. She named the percentage, which was a minority stake. She read the clause in the agreement, which said plainly that operational control remained with Lucas Grant, and that her role was advisory. She named the accounting firm that audited the books and offered to forward their contact information to the board by the end of the day. Then she did something Lucas had not expected. She pulled up a second document on her laptop and read 3 paragraphs from it slowly. It was a record of communications, she said, between a public relations firm and the local paper concerning the article that had run about Grant Auto. The firm had been paid in advance by a shell company whose ownership traced through 2 intermediaries to Hale Automotive Group. She read the invoice numbers. She read the wire dates. She read the names of 2 unnamed sources in the article and matched each one to a former employee of Hale's who had been paid a consulting fee in the same week. She did not accuse anyone. She did not need to. She set the laptop back on her knees, and she said she would make the full file available to the board after the session, along with a formal complaint already filed that morning with the State Attorney General's office regarding coordinated interference with a licensed small business. Hale did not move. He looked at his lawyer, and his lawyer did not look back at him, and that was when the room turned. Lucas felt it go the way a current goes quietly, and all at once, Margaret Ellis called a brief recess. When the board came back, they approved the variance by a vote of 6-1. The hearing was adjourned. People filed out of the chamber without quite knowing how to look at each other, and Hale left through a side door without speaking to anyone. Within 3 weeks, the state investigation would become public. 2 of his dealerships would be served with subpoenas, and the Auto Group's board would quietly ask him to step aside while the matter was reviewed. Lucas would read all of that in the same paper that had run the piece about him, and he would not feel anything that tasted like satisfaction, only something quieter and more useful. Lucas stayed in his seat until the room was almost empty. Naomi rolled over to the end of his row, and she did not say anything right away, and neither did he. "You had that file the whole time," he said finally. "For about a week. You didn't tell me." "No." "Why not?" "Because I wanted to hear what you were going to say first," she said. "If you had read a statement, I would have given them the file, and we would have won on paper. You didn't read a statement, so we won the room.